Good afternoon, and welcome to today's colloquium, Female Perspectives on Research and Entrepreneurship. Today, we'll be hearing from a fascinating group of women on how diverse perspectives can, and in fact, already do lead to more creative research, more sustained innovation, and more inclusive economic growth. As president of Stony Brook University, I can say that diverse and varied perspectives are not only central to our institutional mission, but essential to our society as we hope to create a more inclusive, more sustainable, and ultimately brighter world. Just as we put so much energy and support behind interdisciplinary research, so too must we put our passion behind creating a network of scholars, researchers, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are willing to grow, who are willing to learn, who are willing to defend their claims, change their minds, debate and challenge and dialogue with one another. We are in a time where our path forward as a society will be defined by our innovation and our creativity. Diverse perspectives and collaboration between different institutions, fields, and industries must become the norm. Our panelists know this, and I am so honored to be able to learn from them today. This afternoon, we'll hear from Amanda Elam, CEO and co-founder of Galaxy Diagnostics, Inc., and research fellow at the Diana International Research Institute at Babson College. Elizabeth Dougherty, Eastern Regional Outreach Director for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Pamela Kaufleisch, Endowed Professor of Communication at the University of North Dakota. Siri Terjesen, Professor in the Norwegian School of Economics and Associate Dean of Research and External Relations and Professor of Entrepreneurship at Florida Atlantic University. Jennifer L. Woolley, Associate Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship at Santa Clara University. And our moderator, Clovia Hamilton, Assistant Professor of Technology and Society at SUNY Korea. Dr. Jane Goodall once said that the greatest danger to our future is apathy. As we begin 2022, ready to tackle the most pressing challenges of our time, I am grateful for the passion and integrity of my community, for the network of women, researchers, and entrepreneurs that are breaking down old barriers and making a difference. To all our panelists today, thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. Thank you for dedicating your careers to innovation, creativity, and strengthening women's voices in research and entrepreneurship. We look forward to the exciting discussions.
Thank you for your inspiring remarks, President McGinnis. I'm Rich Reeder, Vice President for Research at Stony Brook University. For those not familiar with us, we're located on Long Island, about an hour east of New York City. So I'm happy to welcome you today to the colloquium on female perspectives on entrepreneurship and research. I think we all recognize this is a much needed discussion that's important for the development of entrepreneurship and research throughout the world. It's becoming more and more obvious how diversity and inclusivity have an impact on the success of research and the development of business. Here at Stony Brook, our entire research community believes creating an equitable and integrative work environment to be an essential part of the success of our innovation culture. So we're proud to host this meaningful discussion as we want all voices of our community to be heard. You've already heard from President McGinnis about the impressive accolades of our distinguished panelists. Thank you. And I want to share with you some of the topics that will be discussed today. These include gender equity and SBIR, STTR funding, the relationship of female academics and venture capitalists, promising national programs focused on growing new tech-based ventures for women, how women can use communication to better enhance mentoring relationships, and how the U.S. Commerce Department can help female academic entrepreneurs. So I'd also like to extend my thanks to all the panelists for sharing your unique experiences in the discussion today. And a special thank you to Don Tumanello, who is Associate Director, and to Dr. Sean Boykovich, Director of Stony Brook's Intellectual Property Partners, and also to the IPP and Economic Development team for putting this event together today. Now, I'm pleased to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Dr. Clovia Hamilton. Clovia teaches ethics, software applications, and industrial operations management at SUNY Korea. She's a patent attorney and former USPTO patent examiner. She was a tech transfer specialist at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, also at Old Dominion University, and at the EPA's National Fuel and Emissions Lab. Clovia also served as a small business counselor at Georgia Tech and counseled more than 200 businesses on how to obtain government contracts. She owned her own business for 10 years, and her current scholarly research includes multiple publications on the topic of university tech transfer. Clovia, thank you for joining us today, and let me hand this over to you now to begin the event.
Thank you for the introduction. We have a stellar panel of experts, so I'm not in this alone. I do want to do a little housekeeping before we get started. We will have Q&A, the question and answer section open to you. You can post questions out there. We may not get to the questions until toward the end of the program. We do have a number of questions and topics that we want to cover, so we want to make sure that we get you all the nice gold nuggets of information that we have planned to deliver today. And then at the end of the session, we'll have the Q&A, and then we'll have a chat session. We want you to be able to network with one another. In the chat, we encourage you to let us know who you are, let us know your name and your affiliation and that sort of thing. We are going to record the presentation. We're going to have a conference proceeding. So we're transcribing everything, and we'll publish a proceeding. So I think so far there have been questions about, are we recording this? And yes, we are. We will transcribe it. We will have a proceeding, and we will have resources. So the gold nuggets that I shared with you, feel free to take notes, but we will have all of that information available to you. We will also share a list of the registrants. So far, I see that we have 116 participants. That's major. That's wonderful. So I think I've shared with you the housekeeping information, and I want to start us out by giving you a little information about women businesses. According to the U.S. Small Business Administration, there's 1.1 million women-owned businesses. That's pretty impressive. 99.9% of them are small. And what we mean by small is that a small business has less than $750,000 in revenue. So less than or equal to $750,000. I was a part of a program years ago called Count Me In, where we were trying to get 1 million women-owned businesses to the $1 million mark. So there are those efforts that are going on. To be a woman-owned small business in the federal government system, to be recognized as small, the businesses have to be controlled by at least one woman. They have to be owned by 51%, have to be 51% woman-owned. And what's interesting related to university tech transfers, way back in 2005, 17 years ago, Mary and Jerry Thursby at Georgia Tech published that 43% of male business faculty were disclosing inventions and working on becoming academic entrepreneurs, 43% more than women. So that's a bit of the focus today is that we want to talk about female entrepreneurship. We want to talk about some research results and what has happened since those results were published in 2005. So one of the things that has happened since then was that the Autumn Association of University Tech Managers has initiated some programs to try to encourage universities to have more women involved in disclosing inventions and becoming a part of tech transfer and tech commercialization. And we have panelists here today. They're going to one by one introduce themselves to you. We'll start off with those introductions, and then we'll go into some questions, because even though Autumn has initiated programs to try to increase women, some of the things that they're doing is they're trying to collect metrics, tracking the female inventors. There's a Women Inventors Committee next month in New Orleans. The Association of University Tech Managers, we're convening, and I'm going to be a part of the diversity, inequity, inclusivity committee. We're going to talk about some of the diversity initiatives. So there are some things happening. Some of the things that they have a toolkit out on the University Tech Transfer, the Association of University Tech Managers website, that talks about things like there's the need to collect metrics. There's a need to have more roundtable discussions like this. There's a need to collect feedback from women business owners, and a need for funding. So we're going to talk about some of those topics, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the research that we're familiar with. I will lead by asking questions. And I'll stop here to allow for introductions. So we'll go one by one with introductions. Let's see, we'll start with Amanda Elam. Amanda, you want to tell everybody who you are and introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to join the conversation here today, Clovia. My name, I think I was already introduced as CEO of a medical diagnostics company in North Carolina. I'm also a research fellow at the Diana International Research Institute at Babson College, which is the home of the Diana Project.
Next up, we have Jennifer Woolley. Jennifer, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name, as you know, is Jennifer Woolley, and I'm an associate professor at the Santa Clara University's Levy School of Business, and I focus on entrepreneurship, specifically high-tech and science-based entrepreneurship, and the infrastructure that is built to support those entities.
Very good. And then we have Pam.
Yes, I'm Pamela Cobflush. I'm the Charles R. Chuck Johnson Endowed Professor of Communication at the University of North Dakota. And I'm the author of Mentoring Enactment Theory, about how people can use their communication to form, maintain, and repair mentoring relationships.
All right, we've got Siri.
Hi, great to be with you all. My name is Siri Turchison, and I am the Phil Smith Professor and Associate Dean at Florida Atlantic University's College of Business in Boca Raton, and also Professor too at my alma mater, the Norwegian School of Economics. And I'm excited to be here because I've been part of the GEM project that Amanda's going to speak about for almost the last 20 years. And this was my first choice, even for my dissertation topic as a master's student. So thrilled to be with all of you today. Thank you.
Very good. And then we have Elizabeth Dougherty with U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Thank you, Clovia. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be on such an esteemed panel. It's lovely to be with you. Thank you to you, Clovia, and the entire team there at Stony Brook for issuing the invitation for me to be a part of this dialogue. I'm a 30-year veteran of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, having started as a U.S. patent examiner many years ago, and I've had the pleasure of serving my agency in a variety of different roles. My current role is as Eastern Regional Outreach Director, which is really just a very long way of saying that I get to help people every day, and I get to help remarkable inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And it's been a real point of pride and pleasure to work with an agency that is committed to expanding the diversity of those who see themselves as inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And I hope I can bring some of that to the conversation today. So again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to a really robust dialogue.
Very good. Well, we'll get started with questions. I'm going to start with Amanda Elam. Amanda is faculty at Babson College. In fact, most of us have the Diana Project in common. We met up in Kansas City a few years ago. And so Amanda is going to briefly tell us about the Diana Project and her experience with the GEM monitor. It's the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Report on female entrepreneurs. So let's get started with that, Amanda.
All right. Well, thank you, Chloe. So I'll begin by saying that the Diana Project is actually an international research consortium. It was organized in 1999, and it was really designed to bring together research scholars around the world who were studying women's entrepreneurship, which was sort of like a minority topic and not something where those scholars had other people even in their schools researching the same topic. So we created a forum where people could come together, share their knowledge, and really build on each other's expertise and resources. It's been very successful. In 2020, we created a permanent home for the Diana Project at Babson College with the establishment of the Diana International Research Institute, DIRI, as we call it, and we're expanding our mission. So we're trying to take the conversation that's been happening for over 20 years among researchers, and we're trying to branch out to include other stakeholders. So we want investors involved in the conversation. We want bankers and other funders involved in the conversation. We want educators and those people who are starting and growing programs to support women entrepreneurs around the world involved in the same conversation that we've all been having for a long time and benefiting from the thought leadership and the knowledge that we've created. And I think that the GEM Women's Report is one example of what scholars really have to bring to the understanding of women's entrepreneurship and how it figures so importantly in communities and in countries, and really the very real and important contributions that women entrepreneurs are making around the world. Our latest GEM report for women's entrepreneurship was released in November of last year, and in that report, based on the data, we estimate that there are over 400 million women around the world starting and growing businesses today. That is a sizable population, an important population. As Clovia mentioned, that most of those women are running very tiny businesses. So are most of men, to be fair, right?
That's true.
It's just that when we come to looking at who's growing the biggest businesses and who's doing the most innovation and who's doing the most export, women tend to trail men. This year, in the GEM Women's Report, we're trying to flip that narrative a little bit. Because year after year, that's the same story we hear all the time, right? Women are trailing men, women are trailing men. Women aren't doing as much as men. They aren't growing businesses that are as big. But women are still doing those things. And if we're going to change the stereotypes that are continually used to diminish what women are doing, we need to look at the data a different way. And so the important statistic for everyone to walk away with here is that 1 out of 3 women entrepreneurs starting businesses today are high aspiration. They want to grow big businesses, right? 1 out of 3. So for every country, every region, every program looking to support entrepreneurs, you need to be supporting women. It's 1 out of 3 of the aspirational, big goal entrepreneurs in your consortium. Why aren't you helping them? And 1 out of 2 entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, 1 out of 2 of all entrepreneurs offering innovative products to their marketplace are women. So half of all entrepreneurs innovating are women. Why aren't we supporting them better? And then 1 out of 3 entrepreneurs who are involved in internationalization, so exporting to other countries, are women. Why aren't we helping them? So I'm going to stop there.
So when you say, why aren't we helping them? What type of evidence do we have, Amanda, related to barriers or the lack of help? Is this
Well,
what we're hearing when we collect the data for the GEM report and that sort of thing?
Right, and I think there's really two different sets of measures that I focus on. I talk of them as sort of cultural measures and structural measures. I'll start with the cultural measures. This is what gets everybody excited, right? Stereotypes. Women face a lot of stereotypes. I'll start by saying that women don't just face negative stereotypes. There are also a lot of very positive stereotypes for women in business. We know that women in business are really good at customer service and support. They're really good at marketing, right? They're intuitive, in fact, at marketing. They have a good idea about the customer value proposition. They are actually considered gifted at organizational routines. Those routines, by the way, that help a business grow and offer consistent service. And they're also gifted at administrative details, really, not losing sight of the details and everyday business operations. And I think that those are really great things, but it ends up meaning that women are obvious candidates for administrative positions, right? And entry level. But what about advancement? And it's those same negative stereotypes about women's business leadership that work against women as entrepreneurs, right? And so some of those are that women are risk averse, that they won't take as big a risk. Well, guess what? On average, women outperform men in a number of different areas of business. They make better portfolio managers on average because they do more calculated risk. Men are more likely to start unicorns, but they're also more likely to have devastating failures and losses of hundreds of millions of dollars. Women tend to converge around the mean as business leaders. I think other negative stereotypes that face women too are things like, the whole sort of public speaking, charismatic leadership. Will anyone listen to them? Is anyone going to listen to them? Can they really lead this organization? And I think that is a problem. I think it really works against it. And women are a heterogeneous population, just like men are. They come at business startup for many different reasons, with many different goals and interests. And just as there is a small group of men who make wonderful, charismatic leaders and are willing to take huge business risks and grow things, there's a small group of women who are quite willing to do that again. Whether those are the best business leaders, I think I will leave to the committee, the panel here to consider. But the positive and negative stereotypes, are what really inspire us when we're making decisions about ourselves, our capabilities, and where we should be spending our talents. And as long as women are hit with these negative stereotypes, it undermines our self-confidence. And more importantly, I think what we're seeing in the venture capital and angel investing data is actually disincentivizes investors to invest. They just don't have a lot of confidence that women can pull it off, and not necessarily because they don't believe women are talented, but because they believe that the whole world is against them. So why would you invest in them?
I experienced that with my own consulting firm. I was in business maybe 5 years with steady income and could not get a line of credit from a bank. And finally, SunTrust gave me a line of credit, maybe in my 5th year, after several years, and I would see other businesses get funded. And the banker told me that it's very hard for her to convince leadership at the bank to fund women-owned businesses, and especially minority race women-owned businesses. So that's why it took so long. I would submit small business loan applications and credit line applications, and they would just get rejected. So I lived that, you know,
Yeah.
firsthand. So I know, you know, the
And-
funding is a real issue.
And Clivia, there's a perfect example of where the structural characteristics come in. So women have less in terms of personal savings. They are less likely to own a home. They are less likely to have any kind of security. They're less likely to have a vigorous credit history that makes them a good risk. And all of these factors really work against women in banking. The rules around who you give money to, who you make loans to in banking are pretty strict, right? Loan officers don't have a whole lot of play. It's not high discretion. You either qualify or you don't. Digital banking seems to be removing any discretion that might play a role there. But in private investment, it's all discretion, and it's all about confidence in the leadership, confidence in the market opportunity. If most of our investors are men, guess what? They are less likely to understand what a female market, so femtech and markets that are really driven by the interests of women, they're less likely to understand that. And so it's a complex problem set. Again, cultural and structural factors are contributing to the challenges the women entrepreneurs face around the world.
Wow, just wow. And that brings us to our next panelist, Jennifer. So I have some questions for Jennifer Woolley. For Jennifer, during Stony Brook's last panel discussion, academic entrepreneurs at Stony Brook mentioned taking advantage of the federal agency's SBIR funding programs. So when I'm talking about Stony Brook's last panel, the intellectual property partners, the tech transfer office at Stony Brook had a panel discussion ahead of ours some months ago, and SBIR funding was discussed. And the SBIR and STTR funding programs, they focus on developing innovative solutions to pressing problems. The SBIR program requires that the applicant be from a firm with fewer than 500 employees. And the STTR program requires that the applicant collaborate with the university or a federal lab. So it doesn't have to be Stony Brook or one of you all's universities, or it can be a federal lab. So Jennifer, you studied nanotechnology and genomics, both, very heavy, impressive fields of study, but you've studied firms in these areas. What data exists related to gender and related to the SBIR and STTR programs?
Well, thanks for asking this, because this is really exciting and a really interesting area of structural support for women. When I studied specifically nanotech, and I looked at nanotech because it crosses a lot of different industries, and it's very science-based. I actually looked at, who's getting these SBIR, and that's Small Business Innovation Research Grants. And the STTR is for tech transfer specifically. And 59% of companies obtained an SBIR or STTR grant, 59%. And over half of those went on to phase 2, which is more commercialization of those initial funding innovations. Now, when I broke this down by gender, backing up a second, Amanda talked about how we often take women entrepreneurs or women academics or women as this homogeneous group.
Right.
And it's so great to be able to parse some of this apart a little bit. So just starting with women on founding teams, found that 65% of founding teams with women obtained an SBIR or STTR grant. That means it's higher than average, significantly higher than average. Now we don't know, we don't know how many of these firms actually applied versus the amount that didn't apply, but still it's a significant amount. Now what's more interesting is when I considered the companies that had women who worked at universities, such as professors or research scientists, postdocs, students, 77% of these firms with academic women on their founding teams obtained SBIR or STTR grants. Now I'm gonna back this up a second because I get very excited about this. If I flip that and I look at male academics, only 52% of them, firms with male academics on their founding teams, obtained SBIR grants. 77% versus 52%. Now that's a considerable difference. So when we say as a stereotype that academic women aren't being innovative or aren't being entrepreneurial, that's just wrong. We have data that shows that they're actually making huge contributions in terms of innovative research.
That is amazing. I didn't know it. Do you think there's a problem of messaging? You know, why aren't we hearing these statistics?
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I am the keeper of the statistics. No. There isn't a lot of information that gets shared about these wonderful statistics. I mean, it's not like we're on the headline news. So it's a slow process to get the word out. But as we grow our community and have more of these panels, people will start to learn. And just as a related concept, we've actually grown a huge percentage of the population of just scientists in general, and we're almost at parity in the sciences for PhD students. So again, being very innovative, and these PhD students are becoming entrepreneurs and working for very innovative companies.
Very cool. There are a variety of ways that an entrepreneur can exit a business. What have you learned about the exits or firm outcomes for the women entrepreneurs? What can you tell us about exiting?
Sure. So in general, in terms of just closing your company, there's not a lot of difference between male and female founded firms. Unfortunately, firms with women professors are more likely to close. But those with female research scientists are much less likely to close. So if we pull apart the heterogeneity of these groups a little bit further, we can start to look at the motivations and the backgrounds to get a little bit more information about how innovative these companies are and how their career trajectories actually influence where they're taking their companies. And interestingly, women as research scientists are creating a huge number of companies, and they're actually much, like 11 times more likely to have a company that's acquired than other firms. And
wow,
it's twice as likely for male research scientists, but 11 times for women research scientists. That's amazing, to create a company that is valued and is acquired by somebody by another company who sees the value of that innovation.
So would you say that's the goal, to get acquired in order to profit from that buy, that sale, in the growth of your business? Would that be the end goal?
Well, I live in Silicon Valley.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
I'm a little jaded. But around here, and I think a lot of places, we all know that there aren't that many companies that go IPO. And there's a handful that become unicorns that are billion-dollar companies.
Right.
But if you're actually thinking about how you can exit in a profitable way, there aren't that many options. And an acquisition is one of the best, if not the best, way to exit a company and move on and do something else.
Right. Well,
if that's what they want.
What can you tell us specifically about the academics? I love that there are 77% academic women. I didn't know that statistic, and that's amazing to me. But what can you tell us about the women? for example, the sort of things we hear in the hallways in tech transfer and among faculty is that women, the barriers specific to women would be things like pregnancies, our children, raising our children, families, and even tenure and promotion. You know, if being involved in tech transfer and academic entrepreneurship is not valued and doesn't count toward tenure, then that would be they would be discouraged. But to hear that 77%, you know, the number is as high as 77%, that's encouraging. But what type of barriers can you share with us along those lines? You know, just anecdotally.
Well, I think there's a lot of anecdotes out there, so I want to be careful.
Right.
I think it comes back to, a lot of this comes back to the types of careers that people are choosing. When I looked at career trajectories, I found that when looking at founding teams, women professors, or you're more likely to be a research scientist than a professor if you're a woman founding a company. And it was the reverse for men. And that could be career trajectories, it could be mentorship, it could be motivations. There are a lot of different things. It could be the sheer numbers. So I think there's a lot of things that are, need to be researched, obviously.
Right.
But also there's a big shift going on right now as we're paying attention to working from home, paying attention to the different roles that people are taking in parenthood and the different motivations that people have in starting companies. And as we see more and more women in academia or outside of academia becoming involved, the barriers are breaking down. And as we see more people to emulate, this becomes a more attractive career path and more possible career path overall.
Right. So what I guess a takeaway would be,
there's hope.
There's hope and there's a need, there's a gap. You know, this is an exciting gap that we need to collect more metrics. This is what the Association of University Tech Managers are trying to do with their women's initiative. This is what the Diana Project is trying to do. This is what we're all trying to do, is collect more metrics. We need to collect more data to fill this gap, and not, like you said, be careful about all these anecdotal barriers and reasons. We need to focus on real research, you know. And that brings us next to Siri. Siri, the National Science Foundation, what we call the NSF, administers the I-Corps program. And I-Corps is an initiative to transition NSF-funded research from the lab to a product and into the marketplace. So this is tech transfer and tech commercialization. And the I-Corps Sites Act is a training ground for faculty, for postdocs, graduate and undergraduate students to learn how to increase the impact of their research by exploring these commercial potentials. And you studied all this wonderful data. And the first few years you shared with me a while back didn't have any gender data. I didn't realize that, so that was a shock. I'm being shocked all over the place. I've got a lot of reading to do. But what have you learned about the women ventures now that we have the gender data?
Thank you so much, Clovia. Thank you, everyone. You know, that is a shock, right? To go into a research project at the time in 2018, but even now, and find that this is a major government expenditure, and we've got all kinds of data on how the teams felt about each other and the members, but there wasn't data on gender. But luckily we have, actually, to Jennifer's point earlier, some anecdotal evidence, which we can share. And of course, we're looking at the data. And one of the distinct pleasures, both at American University, my prior institution, and here at Florida Atlantic University, has been the principal investigator of those sites, so working closely. And I want to say I-Corps is a truly bipartisan effort, and it spans the entire country. So Anyone who's at an R1 or an R2 institution or nearby can take advantage of this. It's supported by all legislators, and it's just trying to increase the supply of ventures, really to get to where Jennifer was with the SBIR and STTR and other funding. So it runs at 70 universities across the country, fields between 10 and 40 teams a year, and then there are national efforts where people can go in. But on average, takes about 7 weeks of training, has 100 different customer interviews, and has a team of about 3 people. And the latest data absolutely include women, and these women are serving, they could be the entrepreneurial team lead, they could be like an I-Corps team lead or a technical mentor, and they're participating. And of course, that's to the points that Jennifer raised earlier, because women are increasingly, not only the PhD students in these programs, that they're parity with men, but they're the faculty in these programs. And if we go lower levels than the PhD, the master's and the undergrad, then pretty much women now outnumber men at most universities.
Wow.
Now, whether or not that's in the sciences, in the US, Korea might be different now, but this has been the case for several years now at most universities. There are some exceptions. So this is exciting because now a professor can go into the classroom and recruit students, can say, hey, I really liked that business plan project that you did. Did you ever think about really commercializing that? One exercise that I had in my class was actually to go to the US PTO and look up patents and ask the students to think about whether they might want to commercialize those. And there are, as you probably know, databases where the US government just tries to promote the patents that are available for commercialization within the US. So that's a perfect training ground, even for those students who haven't invented something themselves. So wonderful opportunity, many, many, many more women. There's a little bit of, what we would call like a nice natural experiment in the data, because the NSF has tried to target programs to women and minorities increasingly, so those numbers are up. But we definitely see this. And let me give you a couple of anecdotal examples.
Okay.
I have a former student, Irina King from American University, who's an undergrad, and she founded a company called Surgicare, which is an intubation tube. She worked on that with the NSF I-Corps, and then as soon as she finished her undergrad, no master's, she went to MIT to do her PhD. And another student, I was talking with her yesterday, Samantha Hepworth, worked with a male student on a venture that was drones to scan coastal erosion. It's a lot easier to do it by drone than it is to go out to the coast to look at the soil erosion. And she's now running an entrepreneurship program and applying into master's programs. And another one that the NSF I-Corps promotes is 2014, 3 ladies at Carnegie Mellon University who founded a venture that tracks human trafficking. And then they were successful in getting SBIR funding to take that company Traffic Jam to the next levels. So another piece that we know from research, and I know Pamela is going to cover this, is that women want different mentors and have different relationships, and the NSF I-Corps allows that. It's not just one person out there that you imitate, but you're looking for multiple mentors for your venture, and then you're getting advice from those 100 customers, which would include men and women. And then you really join this social network and fabric. So I think it's a truly exciting program. I encourage anyone who's at a university to look at it, and anyone who wants to provide mentoring support to think about working with their university that's local as a mentor.
I think there are several Autumn members, tech transfer offices that make use of students. And part of my PhD research was to look at historically Black colleges and universities. The minority serving institutions aren't as actively involved in university tech managers. So that's one of my lifelong dreams, is to see those numbers increase. And some of the historically Black colleges and universities, their leadership realized that it's important to nab the students early on, like you said, let's look at the student projects. Let's look at the student business plans. Let's look at, pay close attention to their ideas and that sort of thing. And some of the historically Black colleges are under-resourced. So they look at students as an opportunity to increase their capacity for evaluating technologies that are developed at universities. So, I think this is an area that we cannot ignore, or focus so much on practitioners and on professors. We need to also include our students in this equation. So that, you mentioned mentoring, and that's a nice segue to Pam. Pam is going to talk to us about mentoring and communications. And so Pam, you study women business owners and their mentoring relationships. We all have mentors, and I think we take them for granted often, and we don't really study or reflect on, when they go, we know when they go bad, we know when they're not so helpful and that sort of thing. But I think we need to, I love that you researched this formally. And I had my own consulting firm for 10 years. I relied heavily on mentors as an academic tenure track professor. I rely heavily on mentors still to this day. I think a lot of us do, because we need help with navigating, these waters. So my question for you, I have a couple of questions for you. And the first is it hard for women to find mentors? Do you think it's harder for women than men?
Actually, women have wonderful skills at finding mentors and finding relationships. So women are natural relationship builders and can form many, many ties quite quickly. One of the problems that women have is that they don't necessarily recognize when they're being mentored, especially if their mentor is a woman. So when women have mentoring relationships, the communication in those relationships is very similar to the communication in women's friendships. So there is more intimacy in the interactions, there's more closeness, and they sound a lot like they're talking to their dear friend. Right. And in a way, they are talking to a dear friend, but it's a dear friend that's helping them, that's providing tangible aid in securing money, in securing connections, in getting their name mentioned in the right circles. And they very often don't see them as mentors because they are used to seeing a more male oriented mentoring model where it's more hierarchical, there's more distance. And in the women's mentoring relationships, they're much closer relationships and they're much more interactively like friendships. And so often what happens is women sit there in a room and their proteges are there and they're very proud of their proteges. And then the proteges will say, I've never had a mentor. I would really appreciate having a mentor. I've had to do this all alone and I haven't had a mentor. And they have mentors, they just don't recognize that they have mentors. And it's sad for the mentors to not be recognized, but also sad that the women aren't realizing that they actually do have mentors. So I think if you ask women about mentoring, they'll say, no, I don't have mentors. It's hard to find a mentor. There aren't women in positions to help, but actually there are women in positions to help and who are interested in helping. But the communication is going to be much more informal than you would expect with men.
Got you. I think some of that, just reflecting on my own career, I've been out here 35 years. as an engineer, as a lawyer, and always, always maybe perhaps often the only female. So there really, if you're the only female, there's so few females in your circle, professional circles, then the mentors are going to be male. And then when the females do help us, like, I can relate. And I can also relate to how important it is for us all to reflect on our relationship with one another, with women, and to ask, when have we been helped and mentored and guided? I can sit here today, right now, this moment, and say, I think men have helped me more than women. I can honestly say that. Now, if I were to actually gather metrics and look at things more closely and that sort of thing, then the numbers might shift. But I think most women, in my situation, scientists and engineers and researchers, we would probably say that men helped us more in our careers, but again, that's anecdotal and that sort of thing. So, but it's very important that we get credit where credit is due. And so if there are women who are mentoring and we want to encourage more of that, then we absolutely need to recognize it. What can you share with us in terms of communicating with one another?
So I have actually helped women in engineering programs, helped connect women with other female engineers that are more advanced. So, and one of the problems is figuring out what they can talk about, because especially in a formalized mentoring program, people spend a lot of time trying to perfectly match a mentor with a protege. And the bulk of the time in the mentoring programs are just matching these people. Then they have a beginning event of some sort and the people are matched, and they might meet and have lunch and maybe a coffee, and then it's pretty much over. And the problem is that they don't have a context for that relationship to go on.
Right.
So having some sort of task to work on together is incredibly helpful in building a mentoring relationship. So that's one of the ways you can start a mentoring relationship, is offer to help somebody, because we are all overworked. We are all committed maximally. And by offering to help, that's something very tangible. And most people can see something that you could do that would be helpful. And it provides a interaction. It provides a reason to have communication. So you have something beyond just your commonalities, but you have some project you're working on together. So offering to help. Amazingly, people enjoy being around people who are positive. That sounds really like a no-brainer, but it's amazing how hard it is for people to be positive sometimes. And positivity is related to relational satisfaction, and it's the strongest form of communication relating to satisfaction. And that's in all sorts of relationships, but in mentoring relationships as well. I mean, you have so much time, you can help so many people. If people are positive about working with you and positive about what you're interested in, it's much more fun to work with people who are positive than people who are negative. And so being positive, helping with tasks, introducing mentors and proteges to networks, helping to connect them, providing assurances that you'll be there in the future, and being open about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, how things actually are going. So those are some of the things you can do.
The Association of University Tech Managers, as I mentioned earlier, they have this toolkit that they're working on for how to help females, inventors, academic entrepreneurs, and that sort of thing. And I could totally see the need for more information on best practices for mentoring, and to include these gold nuggets, you know, the positivity, the networking, the sharing of resources, and that sort of thing. You know, how to go about matchmaking. I think all of those types of things. I can say, you know, I've been in tech transfer for many years, since the 1990s, and we really haven't had much of that available. So, you know, again, this is another gap area where I think we need to fill it with more, you know, research data and research results on best practices and whatnot. So, you know, I appreciate you, Pam.
Thank
You know, I think we absolutely need more of this type of support, you know.
Yeah.
And then we're down to a half hour more in our program. We want to have enough time for Q&A and for a bit of networking and chatting at the very end. But last but not least, we still have some more questions, but I absolutely want to get to Elizabeth Dougherty with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. We have the Patent and Trademark Office in common. We did not know each other before this event, but you mentioned 30
Once
years
a
ago.
colleague, always a colleague.
That's right. And about 30 years ago, I was a patent examiner in Alexandria. I think you guys have moved from Alexandria. Where are you all? No, we were in Crystal City.
Correct. So we've been in
And-
Alexandria about 15 years now.
Okay.
With lovely campus style setting. We welcome, when the buildings reopen to the public, we welcome everyone to come and visit. We love to have the public in our facility.
It's such a cool experience. I've been trying to encourage our campus and other campuses to have formal programs for students, so that students can be encouraged to become patent agents, patent attorneys, patent examiners. I think universities are ideal for that. I know Georgia Tech has a formal program, and I would love to see other universities do that sort of thing. But you have a lot of golden nuggets for our audience. So at the U.S., the Patent and Trademark Office is a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And under Gina Romano's leadership, there's a rebranding going on about the National Council for Expanding Innovation and the Council for Inclusive Innovation. So can you tell us a bit about that?
I'd be happy to. I'm thrilled, in fact, to share, to shine a light on this remarkable program. So as Clovia suggests, this initiative was previously called the National Council for Expanding American Innovation, or NCEAI. And it has, in fact, been rebranded as the Council for Inclusive Innovation. And that was due to a number of factors, one of which was the alphabet soup was getting a little bit confusing. There is the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which shared all of the same letters. So I think that might have been causing a bit of confusion. And because we've also transitioned this initiative from the past administration to the current administration under Secretary Raimondo's strong leadership, we are thrilled to rebrand it in a very clear and concise way, again, as the Council for Inclusive Innovation. And I am excited and thrilled to report that just today, the Secretary of Commerce and the Deputy Secretary of Commerce met with both officials from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and all of the members of the Council of Inclusive Innovation to endorse and support the efforts of the Council. The Council is rolling forward with not only 7 initiatives, which touch on a wide variety of ways in which we can increase participation in innovation, entrepreneurship, and invention, but we have also announced our national strategy, a national strategy which is being backed by industry, government, and academia with a wide array of opportunities Now, we have not actually posted that national strategy because, again, it was just rolled out to the secretary today, but it will be posted very shortly on our website on an interactive platform because we're looking to have the public in all to participate by either taking advantage of the initiatives and programs that are going to be offered or by just offering their feedback and thoughts as to what the council and what the members of the USPTO are doing to move this initiative forward. So it's really an all hands on deck effort in using the entire innovation ecosystem. We all have a role to play in this because it's a multifaceted problem. The lack of diversity in invention, innovation, and entrepreneurship, we have to tackle it from so many different fronts. So again, we have rebranded, but I think for a lot of all the right reasons. But you can find us as the Council for Inclusive Innovation, or as we like to say, CI squared.
Well, it's a cool program to know about because if we want to be a part of the solution, I love that it's interactive and we can have a say in a public hearing sort of way. We can get out there and have a say as to what we think the reasons are for any lack of inclusivity in involving women and involving, people of color and, LGBT and, all of the above, so, I think we need to make sure we encourage as part of this program that everyone who's interested in these issues that they get involved and get out there once the platform is open and be a part of that interaction.
Thank you for that support, Clovia. That's really what we're looking for, is for people to be involved. It's again, it's not just for the government to solve this issue. And if you look at the makeup of the council, you'll see that we have wide representation. We have small business, large industry, nonprofits. The leader of Autumn, in fact, is a member of the council. We have remarkable investors. We have remarkable attorneys. We have people from across the federal government, not just the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. In fact, the head of the SBA sits on the council. So we've got a lot of great thought leaders involved, and I think it's going to really be reflected in the outcome of the work of the council.
Well, I'm excited. I think everyone here, who cares about these issues, you can't help but be excited about that. So thank you for sharing. I do have a couple more questions for Jennifer and Elizabeth, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A. I think we're okay time-wise. So Jennifer, you're still here with us. Can you answer what's the relationship between female academics and VCs, the venture capitalists? Everyone's interested in money. So.
Well, I know Elizabeth has some more data on this and some touch points going forward, but it's been pretty well documented that so far, women founders of companies are less likely to obtain venture capital. And when they do get it, they get less of it. When we take into consider female academics, there's no evidence to show that there's anything better there. But on the other side, the women who are becoming serial entrepreneurs actually are creating investment portfolios for venture capitalists that are very successful. And so what I've seen is the serial entrepreneurs, the women who are serial entrepreneurs have been able to make some significant inroads into venture capital and make some very strong relationships with venture capitalists, not only build with the number of deals, but the size of the deals as well. So that's a positive sign for the next rollout.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the why. Why do you think women are less likely to get the venture capital? Is it tied to what Amanda was talking about earlier in terms of stereotypes, negative stereotypes, the structural and cultural issues? And then also, why do you think the serial entrepreneurs are more successful? Does it have to do, for example, with just gaining experience over time or building up, a portfolio and financial credentials that help them to get the next deal. What are your thoughts about that? That's the whys.
The short answer is yes. No, we get a lot of, there's been a lot of work highlighting the difficulties that women face seeking funding, such as legitimacy challenges, discouraging signals. There's some information on having to rely on personal resources. And so overall, there's more likely that women are going to have to rely on smaller pockets of funding. But there are both those structural and cultural issues that Amanda was talking about that are endemic in the venture capital as well, venture capital world as well.
Very good. Thank you for that. And just a few more for Elizabeth. She has some more nuggets she wants to share with our audience. There's a program at Santa Clara University, the High Tech Law Institute program, and the National Strategy to Expand Innovation. Would you like to share information about those programs with us?
I'd be happy to. So Clovia, we've just touched on, with respect to the Council for Inclusive Innovation, that they are in fact rolling out this national strategy, and it will be available on our website very shortly.
So
but with respect to the information that came out of a collaboration between the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the Santa Clara Law School High Tech Institute, we were fortunate to work together as collaborators to host a number of roundtables where we invited in industry, and particularly female leaders within industry, to share best practices of how they have been able to diversify, or the challenges they face in diversifying their respective business or their larger industry. And Santa Clara has done a beautiful job, and I'm happy to share it in our links of resources, a document that shares a number of paths forward. And they specifically broke the information down into several categories that we need to address when, again, trying to increase diversity. That's IP awareness amongst the people participating, both in academia and in corporate America. There, in many instances, is simply a lack of that people may be creating intellectual property, and that it is something to be protected. Invention disclosure, taking another look at how invention disclosures are sought, how they're recorded, how they're addressed. Are they being done in such a way that they're precluding or excluding members of the invention innovation community? Is it the terms that are being used? Is it how you go about seeking those to participate? Also looking at the application approval and preparation. Sometimes, if not handled in the right way, it can, again, dissuade people from participating. And it's often said that women in particular get frustrated by that process. I recently had the opportunity to meet with a stakeholder who told a story about their inventor and how their inventor was reluctant to seek a patent for a technology. And they were reluctant because they didn't want to preclude others from being able to benefit from the technology. And they just wanted to help people. And they just wanted to have this invention out in the community. My first thought was that it was a female inventor, because we hear that all too often as to why, a couple of anecdotal reasons why women sometimes choose to not patent. In fact, it turned out to be a man, which I found very surprising. So, but also inventor incentives and recognition. How are we celebrating, recognizing, and awarding those people, again, within companies or academia, that are recognized as inventors? Are we doing all we can do to highlight them? As we said earlier, you can't be what you can't see. So why not set these people up on a pedestal, to be people to be recognized, to be people to be mentored, to be the people who lead, and others seek to follow. And then, of course, goals and data tracking. I think we've touched on that here today, that in order to address the problem, one, there has to be an awareness of the problem, and that is coming about. That is an area where we are certainly picking up speed. Over time, there have been ad hoc one-off conversations, particularly about women in inventing. But I think it was, perhaps, this is my personal opinion, the National Women's Business Council in 2012 did a collaborative research project with the USPTO where they used our data, and they really started to jumpstart this conversation. Since then, Organizations like the Institute for Women's Policy Research have put out numerous papers. They're a nonprofit organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., who have been a very vocal proponent on, one, the need for additional data on women in invention and entrepreneurship, and also just starting that dialogue, like what we're doing today.
Right.
So, the USPTO is happy to have others in this conversation, so we're not the voice alone in the wilderness. But again, data collection is important, awareness is important, and again, just seeking to address what's really a multifaceted issue.
Very good. I want to thank everybody for answering all these questions, but I think we should move into Q&A. So the first question that we came up with, we want to take a look at, how to best support women in innovation and entrepreneurship. And so the very first question here is, what is the atmosphere like for women academics in terms of collegiality in this arena? So any of our panelists can take that on. Collegiality, any thoughts in terms of entrepreneurship?
Sylvia, I'll offer, since I actually started a business when I was teaching at NC State University with two co-founders from the vet school. I've never personally encountered any issues with collegiality, but I wasn't in a tenure track role, so I wasn't having to deal with a lot of service issues. Quite the opposite. I found there was a lot of support. NC State's engineering, tech, ag school. Yeah. And women are very involved in all areas. I don't know if other people have encountered a different circumstance.
Okay. Any other thoughts from our panel?
I like Amanda's answer. And I also like where Pamela was going earlier, that women have these natural skills in this. Right. I think a key issue is then how to spend your time. So there's
exactly
a universe of possibilities. And you see this with women first starting ventures and men too, going to all these different events. And then you need to find the group that's going to give you the right information. And that might be, feedback that you really need that is hard to get at first. But I think it's also a challenge on the time. And of course, that's for the constraints we addressed earlier, such as trying to manage with a family or other constraints. So
I agree. I worked in tech transfer at the University of Illinois, and I was director of tech transfer at Old Dominion. And I heard all types of stories. We did have women. We had fewer women than men participate in tech transfer in both programs. But the women really did not complain as much about there being a lack of collegiality as they did having difficulties perhaps in navigating the waters. The women who were married to faculty who had their spousal support seemed to have more support and didn't have those issues. But the more junior women tended to just have difficulties finding their tribe, finding mentors, finding supportive, faculty to kind of guide them on navigating water. And when I talk about navigating water theory, I'm referring to what you're mentioning, time management. Just how to deal with service. As Amanda mentioned, the service, the juggling and balancing service and research obligations and teaching obligations. So I think in that regard, mentoring, what Pam shared earlier, would come in really handy. And I also agree that women, we naturally, most of us, I think, naturally kind of have our relationship building down, but it's who we are, who are the right people, who are, finding our tribe is the big issue. Yeah. So if there's any way these tech transfer offices can help junior faculty become involved by offering those types of support mechanisms, I think that would help.
So Clivia, that's actually what really worked for me, right? Was our North Carolina Tech Transfer Office. For me and my male co-founders, is we're head down and focused on our research or teaching all the time, right? And our tech transfer office basically treated every spin out as sort of part of a cohort and included us in events, and for about 5 years after launch. And
That's cool.
I think they could have kept doing it, by the way, in alumni programs and had us come back and mentor some of the other businesses coming forward, but they didn't do that. And then the other resource that was amazing for me in the early stages was actually the North Carolina Biotech Center in North Carolina. And it's a model for every state. The North Carolina state legislature actually sponsored the launch of the North Carolina Biotech Center, continues to fund it partially. They make grants and loans, and they have intellectual exchange groups. They have programming to start businesses, everything from how to navigate IP to basic marketing, to how drug development works, how FDA approval. They get people in from state, federal levels, universities, and it's just ongoing, right?
That's what
And
it
there are
takes.
networking events you can go to. And they're my tribe. That's how I got launched, was my little group at the university, and then the NC Biotech Center. What other states have programming? What other universities are connected with community programming like that?
Right. That's exactly what it takes. A comprehensive program, a support program. I love that. The next question is, we've already covered collaborations in our last discussion. I think, what we're talking about, finding your tribe, finding your cohort, finding the support, that has a lot to do with collaborations, and encouraging those types of collaborations. We've talked a little bit about tenure and promotion. We've talked a little bit about VC dollars. Let's talk about risk. We can take on risk. Is risk taking encouraged? I know one of you mentioned the level or an extent of women being risk averse or not. So let's talk a bit about that.
Well, since I brought up risk aversion, I'll kick off the discussion. To all the women on the panel, do you feel risk averse? I bet the answer is no.
No.
Because and here, I'll put one statistic out. This is always what's always baffled me about this idea that women are risk averse. Half of all marriages fail in 7 years, and women are more likely to give up employment and job aspirations for marriage. We are huge risk takers. We're just making different calculations at different opportunities and for different reasons, right? Because as a mother, we have a different problem set we're trying to address. So I would like to flip that narrative on its head. I think we make lots of risk calculations. And when I speak on panels, I share my teaching experience, which is, on average, women tend to err towards smart and men tend to err towards bold. And to be a good entrepreneur, you have to be smart and bold.
Yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts about risk aversion?
Yeah, so the mentoring research is interesting in that one of the primary things that prevents people from being mentors is being afraid of risk, seeing too much risk in being intimate with others, sharing your own experience with others, sharing your own thoughts. So to be a mentor means that you're willing to take a risk on someone. And we know that women do mentor and are mentored, but it's a risky proposition. Just having a close relationship is risk.
Right.
And on top of that, I think it's really important for all the aspiring entrepreneurs and innovators to take a step back and think, what is it that you want to do? How are you defining success? And even by doing that, you may find that your metrics for success fly in the face of what you're surrounded by or what you're told is success.
Right.
And that in and of itself is going to be risky, but that's okay. you have to listen to yourself and understand what your own metrics are before you can take on something as huge as starting another company or being entrepreneurial in any way or being an innovator.
I agree.
Yeah, I think very simply, it's part of the recipe for success.
And in our final minutes, I want to hear from each of the panelists. Let's hear from each of the panelists their final thoughts. You want to go first, Jennifer?
Oh man.
I know you
I
didn't
feel like
expect that.
I feel like I'm being cold called. Hey, you.
You
well,
were up first. So.
I do want to thank everybody for being here. This has been a great conversation, and it's really highlighted how diverse the experiences are, how diverse our interests are as researchers, as entrepreneurs, as innovators, and how we need to stay true to that and dig into that even more. So I think it's exciting, and I think this is a great opportunity to continue our interest and our research and understanding this world a little bit better so that we can make it better.
Very good. Pam, any final thoughts?
I think if you're in a position to help, to reach out and help others, and to take a risk on helping someone. And then if you were in a position of needing help, ask for help. But when you ask for help, it's better than saying, will you be my mentor? Better to say something, is there a project we can work on together? Or I'm interested in doing X with you or Y with you. Is there a role I could play? And so then there's something tangible to start that relationship.
Right. Very good. Amanda?
I think I'll go back to my opening comments and take a cue from there. I would like everyone to understand that when we are reporting aggregate patterns of difference between men and women business owners, that most of those differences are explained fundamentally by industry sector. And industry sector determines business size, right? And so I think it's really important to understand their structural characteristics are contributing to these aggregate data that reinforce negative stereotypes. So you have to look way beyond the top line numbers. You really have to look specifically and compare men and women who are similar to each other. I think where that leads me is what we're doing at Deary. We're trying to flip the narrative, right? Maybe it isn't that women are underconfident, maybe men are overconfident, right? Maybe the issue isn't that women are trailing men. Maybe the issue is that women constitute 1 to 3 aspirational growth-oriented entrepreneurs in the world. Why aren't we supporting them, right? And we don't encourage others to get engaged and to support by selling the negatives. We get investors to invest by selling the positives. So let's think carefully about our narratives and the framing when we're talking about women's entrepreneurship. And a delight to be on the panel today. Thank you, everyone.
Glad you're here. Let's see. Have we heard from you, Siri? Siri, you want to go next?
I've been enjoying all these, all this advice. I love that, what Pam said, jump in and help someone. And then I also would offer, stay connected, because it might be that now is a good time and you can offer that advice, but it might be that it's 2 months from now and that connection, or that it's to someone else. And then the other piece is to also not be afraid to offer what might be critical but extremely helpful feedback. That we can't just seek people who reaffirm and tell us the things we want to hear. I mean, there are some things we want to hear, but we also need people to think critically, put themselves in our shoes, and give us the advice that'll help us get to the next level. So that's it.
Elizabeth?
I am happy to round out this remarkable group. It's been such a pleasure to be on such an august panel with such remarkable ladies today. So I guess in part, I would go back to our history. So we issued the first US patent to a woman in 1793. Now, very sadly, it issued in the name of her husband. It was Mrs. Simon Slater. Now, with that said, we this year in 2022, We'll induct the largest class of women to the National Inventors Hall of Fame. It's only 8 women, but that's still huge that 8 additional women are joining the over 500 that make up the National Inventors Hall of Fame. So it goes back to what we've said today. We all have a role to play in this. And I would say and it's been already said by other panelists, if you need help, ask for help. The US Patent and Trademark Office, and I can speak for other government agencies as well. We don't want to be seen as a black box entity where you throw in something and then you sit back and hold your breath. We're an agency about communication and collaboration, and we have so many resources available for inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs, and many of them are my favorite 4-letter word, FREE, free. And that's true in
That's
a
right.
number of government agencies. So be sure and ask for help. We love to offer help. We love to offer assistance where possible. And again, we all got to where we did because someone helped us. So it's always important to reach that hand back. I think of former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and her famous quote, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't support each other." Now, that's not to say that we don't need men and everyone in this equation, but as women, I think we're especially gifted in helping one another. So thank you again for having me today, and thank you to our remarkable panel and audience.
Thanks to everyone. But let's give everybody a round of applause. We'll make sure we'll take a look at what's been posted out here in our chat area. We're collecting everything and we'll include it in our proceedings.